Good afternoon, everyone, and happy U.S.-Mexico bicentennial week, or actually the beginning of the year of celebrations. Whether you're in the U.S., Mexico, or anywhere else in the world, I'm delighted that you could join us virtually to celebrate this historic partnership and also to highlight the importance of U.S.-Mexico ties, not merely looking back, but even more importantly, looking forward into the years ahead. I'm Jason Marzak. I'm the Senior Director at the Atlantic Council's Adrian Arch Latin America Center. I'm delighted to be accompanied today by Ambassador Montezuma, Das Pointer, Omar Vargas, Bosco Martí, Adriana Ibarra, Maria Fernanda Bosmosque. Today, we're going to dig deeper into our incredibly close and complex ties, which of course focus on issues ranging from commerce to security and migration. But we also can't talk about this relationship without recognizing our important cultural, our food, our people-to-people linkages that bind our two countries. I've been recently spending time on the border, which reminded me again how many of our border communities live, frankly, as one community. In some instances, living in Mexico and going to the university in the United States. We see Mexico's rich influence in U.S. culture in our everyday lives. And frankly, the same is true in Mexico as well. Even sports brings us together. In 2026, the U.S. and Mexico, alongside Canada, will, of course, jointly host the next Men's World Cup. Our relationship brings many opportunities, and it's a relationship that is as much domestic as foreign policy as well. Governors, mayors on both sides of the border, in addition to the business community, civil society frequently interact. Mexican companies create U.S. jobs, as do U.S. companies in Mexico. Commerce, our top focus today, is another such opportunity. Last October marked the third consecutive month in which Mexico was the U.S.'s top trading partner. And despite global headwinds related to the ongoing COVID-linked supply chain disruptions and inflation, Mexico's economy is expected to achieve steady levels of growth in 2022 and beyond, driven in large part by external demand from its main trading partner. We, of course, share a 2,000-mile border with close to 50 active land ports of entry that directly impact the lives of millions of Americans and Mexicans. Here at the Adrian Arch Latin America Center, we are committed to advancing this relationship by producing cutting-edge work that focuses on how to make the border work even better. Actually, in partnership with the University of Texas El Paso and Colegio de Frontera Norte, and in collaboration with the State Department, we focus on telling the story of why greater border economic facilitation should be prioritized, a subject we'll discuss today and has continued to gain traction even recently. Newly released findings show that just a 10-minute reduction at the border would lead to an additional $26 million worth of cargo entering the United States each month via commercial vehicles. These 10 minutes would also have a positive annual impact of $5.4 million, yes, over $5 million on the U.S. economy due to purchases by additional families and individuals entering the United States from Mexico. We're just talking about a 10-minute reduction. So today, just weeks ahead of the 10th North American Leaders Summit, Mexico City, we're also launching a short issue brief on the importance of fortifying supply chains to foster competitiveness across North America. The publication makes 4 concrete recommendations on how to advance the trilateral partnership on this front. We'll discuss that more later in detail today. For those tuning in via Zoom, you can also now access the publication by clicking on the link in the chat. A relationship as vital and complex as this one deserves to be celebrated, yes. But we also must do so while acknowledging the skillful diplomacy it requires and the fact that neighbors will have disagreements, but working through these agreements from the basis of common ground is critical. And that's what we do in this relationship. With that, I'm delighted to welcome Mexico's ambassador to the United States, Esteban Montezuma, and U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs, Rachel Pointer, not only to celebrate the relationship, but also discuss its future. Ambassador Montezuma has expertly steered our bilateral ties in Washington. Ambassador, now you're nearly 2 years as ambassador. Time flies when you're having fun. It's great to have you here today, Ambassador.
Yes, indeed, Jason. Thank you very much.
And thank you. And Das Pointer is at the forefront of our bilateral ties, having just recently returned from, Rachel, yet another successful trip, which we'll discuss in a moment. It's great to have you here today.
Wonderful to be here today.
Thank you so much. Well, before we dive into the conversation, I'm also delighted to preview that today's event will also share a video of U.S. and Mexico legislators highlighting the value of this partnership, as well as a private sector-focused conversation on the importance of strengthening supply chains and competitiveness across the border. So with that, Ambassador Montezuma, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. On Monday, as it discussed, the U.S. and Mexico, we celebrated formally celebrated 200 years of ties. What does this milestone mean for Mexico as you look to what is next for the future of the relationship? Of course, we'll see a huge milestone in just a couple of weeks with President Biden's visit to Mexico City.
Well, thank you very much, Jason. Hello, Rachel. So nice to see you. I think that this is a very important moment because it gives us several things. First, perspective. In 200 years, we went from conflict to strategic cooperation as nations. And if you want to divide these 200 years in very, very quick in 5 stages, we started with conflict, then we had our revolutions in the United States and in Mexico. And from there, we started creating a liberal view and liberal values. And then we went into the Second World War where we were allies. And also we started to produce a lot of things that the USA couldn't produce because it was focused on the military production. Then we had a period of a very intense diplomacy in the world. And finally, we had the USMCA, first with NAFTA, which really created a very, very important tie. We became very important partners. And if you want to add, the next stage is really to create a strong North American region. So I think that that's a very important perspective. Then we have momentum, because right now there are about 38 million Mexican Americans and Mexicans living in the United States, about 2 million Americans living in Mexico. The trade is about $1 million per minute, which is very significant. And just to give you an idea, the Mexico bought from the USA last year more than the whole European Union. So you can see the size of our partnership. The other thing that we have is a roadmap for the future, because I think that we are in the path to create a better future, to create a North American region. And this is not just on paper. We really celebrate the Inflation Reduction Act. We celebrate the CHIPS Act that includes North America as a region in order to promote these industrial activities and this partnership between the 3 countries. And as you mentioned, we'll have the North American Leader Summit next January. We have created very different forums like the North American Leader Summit, like the high-level economic dialogue, like the security dialogue, which is the bicentennial security dialogue. We have USMCA. We have in the border the 21st Century Border Executive Committee. So we are working together towards a better future, and the most important thing is a future that really get us tied together, because we believe in the same values. We want to defend freedom and democracy.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I'm going to go back to the strong North America and ask you after turning to Das Pointer first about NALS specifically. You mentioned that the 2 million Americans that live in Mexico, in addition to 38 million Mexican Americans. We've seen even that number increase, right? As a result of COVID, with more Americans deciding that they can work virtually from Mexico City. So this is a trend that seems to be only continuing. Now, Das Pointer, Ambassador Moctezuma mentioned, among other things, the 21st Century Border Management. You were just actually in Mexico, leading the delegation for that 21st Century Border Management meeting. You also recently joined Deputy Secretary Sherman in Mexico as well. From your perspective, what are some of the key issues to prioritize in the short and medium term in order to further deepen this really most important relationship?
Thanks so much for the question, Jason. And I'll just note that I think it's striking that a lot of the points that I was going to hit, Ambassador Moctezuma already hit, which I think speaks to our
Sorry for
shared
that.
priorities and how much we're working together. And I think it's really wonderful. Thrilled to join you and the Ambassador today to have a conversation about really one of the most dynamic, broad and deep relationships that the United States has. And really it's endured for 200 years because it's based on that mutual respect and our shared understanding of our overarching priorities, which include strengthening democracy, protecting our citizens, and building economic prosperity. I think the ambassador pointed out, very eloquently how significant this bilateral relationship is and how much it influences the lives of peoples on a daily basis, as you pointed out, Jason, particularly at the border. Truly, I think millions of our citizens foster their families, communities, and livelihoods based on this bilateral relationship and what happens along that border. I would say some of the key issues of the moment that we're looking at, building on all of the engagements we've had over the last several months. As the ambassador said, we've had the high-level economic dialogue in September, the high-level security dialogue in October, a really successful trip by our deputy secretary in November, and a really successful executive steering committee on border management, which is key to making sure that all of the things we need to see in the security and economic relationship also play out at that border. So all of those encompass a lot of priorities here. Income inequality and addressing that in our countries, combating illicit drugs, but particularly the threat of synthetics, which is really devastating our communities in this country, combating the climate crisis, and preparing for the economy of the future, where we will need greener and more resilient supply chains, as you noted, Jason. I think one of the best things at looking at the bilateral relationship and what we've really built in these mechanisms, including with the USMCA over the course of the last couple of years with the Biden administration, is the recognition that those institutional mechanisms give us that ability to work these issues that are of such importance. They also allow us not only to advance our collective priorities, but they offer the two governments a way to engage with you all, with the public, with the private sector, with civil society, with think tanks and academics, to make sure that the two governments are heading in that right direction, to have a conversation so that folks understand kind of what the two governments thinking is, and then to course correct as necessary. So again, really appreciate you hosting this conversation. The other things that come to mind clearly is the set of issues that we're working on when we look outwardly. And of course, we're both countries that are deeply concerned about what's happening in Haiti right now. The continued food insecurity and political instability that we're seeing there has been deeply concerning, and the situation that's created essentially a humanitarian crisis. So certainly working with Mexico within the context of the UNSC as well to address this issue. And I guess what I'd say is, the United States and Mexico, as evidenced by our bicentennial, we really do share a promising future. And we really have to draw on that unique relationship to seize opportunities and address challenges. And that's what we're really looking forward to do in an upcoming North American Leaders Summit.
Thank you so much. Now, let's see, Ambassador, let's see, you took to ask pointers, talking points for her question. So we'll see. Hopefully she didn't take that for my next question to you. But she mentioned a lot of critical issues that are issues to be worked out together. Inequality, synthetics, climate, constructing the economies for the future, and the importance, of course, of the border, but also the importance for the relationship far beyond the border, the number of states across the United States that depend on Mexico for many jobs. Looking ahead to a few weeks from now, when Mexico will host the North American Leaders Summit, what type of preview can you give us, Ambassador, insofar as the top priorities and desired outputs that Mexico would like to see to come out of this meeting?
Well, first of all, I'm happy that people that is watching us knows how close we're together, that we steal the ideas from each other. That means that we think in the same track. And I recognize that very much from our partnership. Jason, I think that first of all, culture is a cross-cutting theme of the next NALS. And I will give you 5 points that I think are the pillars of this dialogue for January. First is really having a recognition to create societies that respect diversity, equity, and inclusion. As we have said, North America as a region should be the most competitive region in the world, but also a humanistic region. And we need to share these values. Second is to deepen our cooperation to manage migration flows and promote development together. And this is a very important thing because we want to see these migrant flows of the present, but also to invest in creating the conditions for migration not to be a necessity for so many people. And this is the first time in history that migration is seen as a regional problem or a regional phenomena. And if you see the Declaration on Migration of Los Angeles, it has that approach where many countries that are on the flow of migrants from their countries of origin to the United States and now to Mexico, because Mexico has already become final destinations for many of the migrants. You will see that this regional approach will help a lot in really building a safe, orderly, and humane migration, which is what we need. Third, we want to have a more competitive economy, an integrated region. We see our economies not in competition, but in cooperation and complementation, which is also something very important now that nearshoring is something that is driving investment in America and North America. Fourth, I think, is what Rachel said about all these global challenges like the climate change. And Mexico has been committed with very specific commitments to tackle climate change. There has been several visits of the Secretary Kerry to Mexico, and that's another part, a very strong part of our relationship. And last, as also was mentioned, tackling all the arms, drug, and human trafficking on their regional perspective. I think that those are the main themes that are going to be the core of the discussion next January. And there is going to be a common approach to North America that will tell which is the DNA of North America.
Thanks so much, Ambassador. So diverse societies, migration, competitive economies, climate change, security, arms, drugs, trafficking, all issues that provide continuity from previous discussions, the security dialogue, the economic dialogue, the previous NALS. We're don't have much more time, but I do want to talk quickly about commerce, and then end on a migration question. So Das Pointer, this Census Bureau shows that Mexican exports to the U.S. in October increased by nearly 18%, imports by 15%, and Mexico continued to be the U.S.'s top trading partner as we see with. What do you see as the greatest opportunities to further facilitate commerce? And as I think as Ambassador Moctezuma said, to think about further accelerate the fact that this is about cooperation and rather than a competition between our two economies. And how do we do that while also advancing this really important topic of nearshoring?
Thanks so much for the question, Jason. One of the things that I said when I was in Mexico City, co-chairing the meeting on border management, was how important what we do at the border is and how it ties into our conversations under the high-level security dialogue, as well as our conversations on the high-level economic dialogue. It's really incumbent upon us, the two governments, to figure out ways to think creatively and innovatively to facilitate the legitimate trade and travel at the border and to stop the flows of the illicit goods, drugs and arms, and anything else we're seeing that's illicit. And so it's really the idea of making sure that we're thinking creatively and innovatively. I will just say the study that the Atlantic Council did with UTEP is exactly the type of input we need, and the type of thinking to help us and to encourage us to push forward on innovative ideas. I think that both Ambassador Moctezuma and I are energized by, we've had a conversation about some of the innovative programs, for instance, unified cargo processing and using trusted and reliable, but also compatible inspection equipment at the border, in ways that we can work together to do that. I think are exactly the right type of work that we need to see. We also talked a lot in Mexico about using perhaps one port of entry as a model to see where we can make advancements and what are the types of innovative, creative things we can do together, to make sure that, as we say, we look at what it means for literally the daily lives of people at the border, but also our economies, if we can reduce wait times and if we can really think about creative solutions, almost to pull things away from the border, in the sense of, you think a little bit more creatively about how and when and where you can do inspections, for instance. So I think when we work together, we can ensure North America remains the world's most prosperous region and really remains that model for where we can look at lessons that serve as a model for other parts of the world. Where can we be creative? Where can we be innovative? I'll just point out before I close, because I know we're a bit limited on time, that the November 2021 passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law provides us a once-in-a-generation opportunity to really invest in the border. And Mexico has also made a very significant commitment to border infrastructure as well. So this is really a once-in-a-generation opportunity when we look at that, along with the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to really address climate change, as well as the CHIPS and Science Act. They all kind of go together as being opportunities for our two governments, as well as Canada, to think creatively and look at how we push forward in terms of facilitating the North American economic space.
That's great. Thank you so much. And with some of the work that we've done on the border, on the economy, is also showing that you can have greater commercial facilitation that also at the same time improves security. It's not the two are very interlinked. Ambassador Moctezuma, I want to end with you with a question on migration. You raised the importance of a regional approach. We have in about 6 days' time the ending of Title 42. From your perspective, you mentioned migration and the importance of a regional approach, but in the framework of NALS, how can we work together alongside the broader national community, the private sector, to further address some of the underlying factors that are pushing migrants to come to the United States with very few other options?
Well, I think that most of the ideas that Rachel mentioned are the core of our relationship, and I don't want to repeat them, but I want to say something very, very specific, which is first that we are investing in the root causes of migration. So together, the USA and Mexico have been developing social programs to root the people in their own towns and places. Jóvenes Construyendo el Futuro, Sembrando Vida are part of these efforts. And I believe that one very, very important outcome of this NALS meeting would be to really discuss future investments in Central America and some parts of the continent. The other thing, which is very, very important, is temporary workers. We really think that temporary workers it's a very important solution to the migratory process. When a temporary worker comes to the USA, he comes alone. An undocumented worker brings the family to the USA because he doesn't know if he's coming back to his country or not. So they bring their families, and temporary workers come alone and go back home because the family is there. All their income, I've been speaking with many of them, and there are surveys about that, that 95% of the people will tell you that their income goes to build up their homes in their countries and towns. So there you have also a rooting experience. Finally, there is a very important agreement between employers and employees in order to respect all the labor rights and the human rights that we are always together watching to be respected. So I think that's a very important issue. And Canada also has that figure as the States. So I think that's something that will come up.
So thank you so much. I think that's a great note on which to close the conversation. I want to again say Feliz Bicentenario to both of you for this incredibly insightful conversation. But before moving on our private discussion with Omar Vargas and Adriana Ibarra Fernandez and Bosco Marti, I'm delighted to first share a short video that we compiled for today's event, featuring comments from Senator Tim Kaine, Representative Tony Gonzalez, Representative Henry Cuellar, alongside Mexican Congresswoman Cynthia Lopez. So again, Ambassador Montezuma, Das Pointer, thanks for joining us, and let's roll the video.
Hey everybody, Senator Tim Kaine here. December 12th marks the historic bicentennial of diplomatic relations between the United States and Mexico. Our two countries share a 2,000-mile border and extensive trade, security, economic, family, and cultural relations. We do share this deep cultural tie, evidenced by the large diaspora population here in the US, including many Mexican Americans who live in my home state of Virginia. People of Mexican origin represent nearly 60% of our nation's Hispanic population. Nearly 2 million Americans live in Mexico. These people-to-people ties are invaluable. Our two countries also share important traditions of democracy. Those traditions require consistent work to ensure strong and independent institutions, the rule of law, and democratic freedoms. We know that upholding democracy in both of our nations isn't always easy. There are threats and challenges within our countries and around the world, but it's a vital endeavor, and it's the bedrock of our partnership. As we celebrate this bicentennial, I'll continue my work to advance these issues and to ensure the future of the U.S.-Mexico relationship is based on shared respect, shared prosperity, and protecting the fundamental freedoms that are so important to both of our people. Felicitaciones a todos en este evento tan importante y debemos trabajar juntos en los años que vienen. Gracias.
I am Congresswoman at Mexico Chamber of Deputies. Mexico and the United States share more than 3,000 kilometers border. We are more than neighbors. We are friends, our partners. We have one of the most dynamic, complex, and institutionalized relationships in the world. Only regarding trade, Mexico is the second trading partner of the United States and the first destination of exports from California, Arizona, and Texas. My country is the second biggest market for 20 states in the United States. 1 million jobs in the United States depend on trade with Mexico. In addition, the border between Mexico and the United States is the busiest in the world. 1 million people and 300,000 vehicles cross the border every day. As a Congresswoman, I am very pleased that Mexico and the United States commemorating 200th anniversary of diplomatic relationship these years. There are 200 years of being neighbors and friends and many years of fruitful cooperation. Furthermore, holding the North American Leaders Summit on January 2023 in Mexico City is an opportunity to strengthen ties to boost exchanges and promote economic growth and prosperity on both sides of the border. As a member of the United States-Mexico Friendship Group, in the Congress and member of the Fellowship Rio Bravo, I will continue working, strengthened and bilateral, and hope that many of more years of partnership.
Hello, this is United States Congressman Tony Gonzalez. It is my unique privilege to represent the largest U.S.-Mexico border district in Congress. This means I work very closely on binational issues with stakeholders on both sides of the border. In fact, I was in Monterrey just last week to discuss trade, infrastructure, education, and security with various leaders. During this bicentennial, it is important to recognize the extensive cultural and economic impact of this important partnership. Mexico is our second largest trading partner, bringing in billions of dollars and generating millions of jobs. We share nearly 2,000 miles of border, and because of that, we are tied together by a special bond. The potential for growth between both countries has never been stronger, which is why it is essential that we cooperate on a shared vision for the future. We must always strive to create a safer and more effective alliance with an emphasis on free-flowing commerce and cultural exchanges. I'm excited to celebrate this historic 200-year partnership and look forward to continued prosperity between both nations.
Hello, this is Congressman Henry Cuellar. This celebration is a wonderful opportunity to highlight the importance of our trade relationship with Mexico. The Rio Grande or the Rio Bravo River doesn't divide us, but unites us as two countries. As a legislator from the U.S.-Mexico border and as the chair of the U.S.-Mexico Interparliamentary Group, along with my co-chair, my friend Michael McCall, it is crucial for us to recognize the trending trade demands between our two nations and work together to facilitate and strengthen the flow of goods across our borders. Just in my hometown of Laredo, over 17,000 tractor trailers cross the Rio Grande every day. In total, $1.7 billion cross the U.S.-Mexico border every single day across. As a congressman, I've consistently worked to ensure that our trade continues to flow freely between our two nations. I worked along with my colleagues to establish the U.S.-Mexico trade agreement. And again, this is something that's been so important for the U.S. and Mexico. Our relationship between the U.S. and Mexico are very important, and we need to continue working together to strengthen our relationship. As we say along the border, the Rio Grande or the Rio Bravo, as the Mexicans call us, doesn't divide us, but actually unites us together. We need to build more bridges and not walls, and that is my philosophy. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Senator Kane, Congresswoman Lopez Castro, Representative Gonzalez, and Representative Cuellar for your words as we continue to highlight the importance of U.S.-Mexico ties. I will start the final part of this event by introducing the first-class panelists on screen with me today. I am delighted, first of all, that Adriana Ibarra Fernandez, Partner for Trade and Commerce at Baker McKenzie Abogados, is joining us from Mexico City. Adriana, great to collaborate with Baker McKenzie and with you personally in yet another important conversation.
Thank you so much, Maria Fernanda. Thanks for inviting me to participate in this very interesting conversation.
Thank you. Bosco Martí is also joining us from Mexico City. We are extremely lucky that he's a non-resident senior fellow with the Adrian Arch Latin America Center. And he's also the former executive director for Mexico and the Dominican Republic at the Inter-American Development Bank. Welcome, Bosco.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Mafe. Very happy to be here in this panel with such distinguished speakers.
Thank you. And not joining us from Mexico City is Omar Vargas. Omar is joining us from rainy Washington, D.C. as a vice president and head of global public policy at one of the big three, General Motors. Welcome, Omar.
Thank you, Maria Fernanda, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. I also love your holiday decorations there, very festive.
Thank you. It is not a filter. Before we start the conversation, I'd like to invite all of you who are listening in to check out the spotlight that we're publishing today. It builds off of the 2021 key deliverables fact sheet, key deliverables for the 9th North America Leaders Summit that took place last year. The spotlight is concise, digestible, and offers 4 practical forward-looking recommendations needed to foster competitiveness and strengthen supply chains among the 3 countries. So it's truly the perfect read for the holidays. As well, for all of you who are tuning in, please feel free to send us your questions either via the Zoom Q&A functionality or through Twitter. We're monitoring the hashtag 200 years USMX. Now, Bosco, I'd love to kick off the conversation with you. Just framing the conversation, I want to ask you, what is the importance of the upcoming North America Leaders Summit in advancing the key issues around supply chains and competitiveness for the United States and Mexico?
Thank you very much, Mafe. I think this is a great opportunity to have the leaders of the three countries to get together again. It's important to remember a little bit from where this comes. No, in 2005, Presidents Bush, Fox, and Prime Minister Martin launched what was called the Securities and Prosperity Partnership for North America, which has evolved to what now is this North American Leaders Summit. I think it's some of the main issues continue to be being the same, which is strengthening the competitiveness in North America, North America smart and secure borders, and obviously right now with a new emphasis on trying to reduce inequality in our countries. So this opportunity of having the three leaders getting together, after a lot of hard and heavy weight that has been done throughout their embassies, the Department of State, the Secretaría de Relaciones Exteriores, will provide a good framework to try to advance further in these issues. I believe that now with the nearshoring and there's going to be a lot of new opportunities for Mexico in terms of investment, but especially on keeping North America as the most competitive region of the world.
Bosco, a quick follow-up question for you. Would Mexico welcome Costa Rica's potential entry to the USMCA? And I'm asking because we explicitly suggest in today's publication that USMCA countries start to think more boldly and ambitiously about strategically integrating Central America into the region. And last night, Reuters broke a story that the Chavez administration is considering this. How would Mexico receive that?
I think that it's something that it's really worthwhile to analyze and try to see how we can work together. Ambassador Moctezuma mentioned earlier the importance of addressing the root causes of migration. And if we really want to do that, we need to create employment opportunities in the region, in Central America, so people don't have to migrate because they don't have a job opportunity. Certainly, CAFTA it's a great start. I think it puts many issues in common, but I think that there's a lot of complementarity between Mexico, Central America, the U.S. and Canada. So I certainly think it's something that is worthwhile for the governments to discuss. And if we want to get serious about addressing root causes of migration, certainly trade is one of these issues that will create jobs and opportunities.
Thank you, Bosco. Adriana, U.S. goods and services trade with Mexico totaled $725 billion. Compared to pre-pandemic levels, we keep seeing new volumes, new records. Jason mentioned earlier that for a third consecutive month this year, Mexico has continued to be the United States' first trading partner too. So thinking about the North America Leaders Summit, and you, in your perspective from the private sector, what do you see as the greatest opportunities to bring to the table to facilitate trade?
Thanks, Fer. Well, I think companies need to continue taking advantage of the nearshoring phenomenon, but not with cheap labor costs or cheap products, but with high quality products and specialized labor. I think that the USMCA is a great tool that can make products cheaper thanks to duty reductions, but it is important that companies focus on compliance with the USMCA requirements. There are rules of origin that are set by specific type of product that need to be met to demonstrate substantial transformation. And the governments of the importing countries are entitled to visit the US producer or exporter to ensure that these rules are met, and lack of compliance or showing record-keeping compliance can lead to not only payment of duties, but also stiff fines, no? And something new under the USMCA I think is great is the inclusion of labor provisions, which are now part of the agreement. But the other side of this coin is that there is this rapid response labor mechanism whereby manufacturing plants have to demonstrate that they comply with freedom of association rights, and lack of compliance can lead not only to denial of duty preferences, but maybe also to blocking of exports of products manufactured in that facility, no? So I think that the USMCA represents a huge opportunity, but companies must focus on compliance also.
Thank you. And Omar, it's so important to have your perspective. You're in the auto industry. We all know that supply chain disruptions heavily impacted your industry back in 2020. According to Forbes as well, the North American vehicle production dropped by almost 20% in 2020-2021 compared to 2019. And now we're seeing other global events that continue to affect production, to delay production. So I'd like to ask you, A, how is the industry, how's your company specifically navigating these shocks? And B, what would you say, Omar, are some concrete and low-hanging fruit for the US and Mexico to continue to harmonize the infamous list of essential industries? How do we prepare for another major disruption?
Hi, Maria Fernanda. It's two very good questions and comments. I'll share first that actually I think your second question is probably a really important one. So I'll try to spend a little bit more time on that one. First, to your initial question, what we have learned at General Motors is that we cannot leave our supply chain vulnerable to geopolitical risk, to pandemics and natural disasters. And so we are in the process of having sustainable and scalable, secured supply chains. That's our strategy in three short phrases. And with that, it's essentially a local for local strategy. What that means for North America is continued growth and investment in the North American integrated market. And the auto industry is, and I borrowed this phrase from our first panelist with Ambassador Montezuma and Das Pointer. The DNA of North America, I think, is comprising a great deal of the auto sector. It's a significant amount of trade, significant amount of economic impact, job growth and economic growth, technology and innovation, and manufacturing across all three countries. So I do think that manufacturing, onshoring, and nearshoring should be a very strong topic in the summit next month. And I think to Das Pointer's perspective, or to her comments, the legislation advanced in the United States over the last year, particularly the Inflation Reduction Act and the Clean Energy Title, has, I think, a profound opportunity for the United States, for Canada and Mexico to significantly grow in the auto sector, in a number of clean energy technologies. And there's a lot more that has to happen to really make North America strong and robust in these categories. And the range of issues is long. And this I think, gets to your second point about the harmonization. What we learned in the pandemic is that among the three countries, there's inconsistent approaches. And industry work hand in hand with government at the federal and state and local level to try and work through some of these challenges. And I think that perhaps a priority in the summit should be how can the three nations come together and harmonize their approaches and responses to pandemics or other supply chain shocks? There will be more, right? I think a pandemic occurs an average of every 7 years, believe it or not. And so let's be prepared. Natural disasters, geopolitical risk being the same. We're in a very volatile, life is volatile, and we should be better prepared. Our three countries are all federal systems. And so we need to take that into account as we think through how to harmonize these very important policies to ensure that it's not just about business and supply chain shocks. It's about the families and the communities that rely on the local manufacturing and the jobs and the production that happens there, so that there is that livelihood that is preserved and our communities continue to grow.
Thank you, Omar. And Bosco, I know that you were very involved in the creation of NAPAPI. Would you like to comment on what Omar has just said on preparedness for the next major disruption?
Thank you, Mafe. Yes, I think it's very important to have the appropriate channels of communications to try to address these issues and be able to work together as a region, no? And not only as three individual countries. So I think that the recent pandemic allowed us to have the opportunity to put that at test, and even though that there were some challenges involved, I think that the three countries were able to resolve it on a very diligent manner. No, so I think that makes sense to start working on some protocols that would allow us to address those issues on a more systematic way, no, than the ad hoc way that had to be done at that time, because it was something that we were not expecting. No? So I think that working on protocols makes a lot of sense. There's great communication between the three countries, and that's something that we should push forward.
Thank you, Bosco. And Adriana, shifting gears a little bit, we were in Mexico City a couple months ago for our annual Baker McKenzie and Atlantic Council conference. We're talking about nearshoring. I'd like to ask you about e-commerce and the digital advances of USMCA. Have you heard from clients on how e-commerce and digital advances of USMCA are incentivizing or disincentivizing nearshoring? Like, how can the private and the public sectors work more closely to make nearshoring a reality and move from words to action?
I think it's a very important issue. And I think that the USMCA benefits for e-commerce companies have not been publicized enough on both sides of the border. I think governments are failing to promote how easy and predictable it is to make cross-border e-commerce. There are data privacy rules, inclusion of an express prevention from countries enacting data localization rules, electronic signature rules, and cybersecurity principles that are at a treaty level, and that separates Mexico from all other nearshoring destinations. In addition, there are copyrights, trade secrets, and intellectual property rules and remedies that are reinforced in the USMCA. And we have seen some companies which understand this welcoming ecosystem and are starting to grasp the benefits and are setting up tech hubs and IT service centers in Mexico at reasonable cost and with regulatory predictability and solid IP protection certainty. So we have seen companies benefit from this fair, but not enough. I think there needs to be more public information so that companies take these benefits. No, now to make nearshoring a reality, I think the private sector needs to understand the rules and comply with them, and the public sector needs to provide more information about these rules and promote their use, and grant tax incentives primarily to small and medium enterprises so that they can benefit from these opportunities. And finally, I think the Mexican government needs to focus on legal certainty. by means of a consistent application of the law and international commitments. Compliance with international commitments assumed in free trade agreements and other international treaties, I think, is key.
Thank you, Adriana. Those are important points. And I want to go back to you, Omar. The recent, I think it was the beginning of this week or last week, Brookings newsletter was talking about how North American trade is like half of it is intra-regional. And of course, cars is a big part of that. Is there, Omar, a mapping from industries and government on supply chain network in North America? We keep talking about nearshoring. Does this, I don't know, it would seem like a basic first step. Do we have that? And one of the key deliverables that we saw from the 2021 NALS was that was this commitment to set up a trilateral supply chain working group. And we know that there's a Mexico-US and a US-Canada, or a Mexico-Canada one, I'm sorry. But has there been any progress on the trilateral supply chain working group? How would this help, in your opinion, address barriers to increased vehicle output?
Right. First, on the mapping question, there's a number of different data points regarding the footprint of the auto supply chain in North America and the flows. And I think it shows quite profoundly how integrated the auto sector is across the three borders. Within each country, the bounce back and forth that we read so much about, but then also kind of where that impact is in different parts or regions of the United States. Whether it's in the Great Lakes region between Canada and the United States, or along the southern border, particularly the Texas border with Mexico. That's the mapping exercise. And of course, within Mexico, right, quite profoundly from the border regions down into central Mexico, where you have a lot of the innovation, technology, and of course the manufacturing that is occurring. I think where there is potential opportunity for continued dialogue and deepening of the supply chains, it gets to my point I made earlier, and Dad's point I made about the clean energy title in the Inflation Reduction Act. When you look at the potential opportunity for critical minerals, not just extraction programs, but also the minerals processing and deepening the electric vehicle value chain across North America. I know quite well that Canada is very focused on this. And this is, I think, a significant opportunity for the government of Mexico to examine and to propose and to do the outreach necessary to be a part of the discussions that are happening across industry and academia, and of course with policymakers, about how to be a part of this development of the electric vehicle value chain. It's a long and deep value chain, and will require significant technology investment, IP investment, attraction of capital, in collaboration between the public and private sector to really achieve all of its potential.
Thank you, Omar. Now we have 4 minutes left. So Bosco and Adriana, I want to ask you both the same question about the importance of a safe and more modern, efficient border. We've done a lot of work on that topic at the Atlantic Council this year. And my question specifically is about, we know that manufactured products involve the design, manufacturing, and assembly processes across the US and Mexico, crossing the border several times. Then our panelists for the first conversation were talking about the CHIPS Act and the opportunity that it could represent for the region to continue to work together. So my question is about security, the link between security and increased commerce? How can enhanced security increase trade flows between the US and Mexico, and thus better position North America to become a leader in the production of chips? Bosco, on to you first.
Thank you, Mafe. I had the privilege to participate in this study that Jason mentioned at the beginning that we did together with the UTEP and Colegio de la Frontera Norte on a more efficient border. I like very much what Rachel mentioned on her intervention about facilitating legitimate trade, and what was said by Congressman Cuellar in his message about building more bridges and less walls. No, I truly believe, as Das Pointer mentioned, that this November infrastructure law provides a great opportunity to really invest on better technology, to have a more a safer, more efficient, and a border that allows to interchange the different components of trade on a timely way. There's a lot of progress that has been done in terms of having this trusted cargo, no, similar to the global entry, no, for cargo and logistics. I think that having the appropriate technology at the border that allows to have a greater non-intrusive technologies that facilitate this trade will make both our countries a safer place, because we're going to be able to identify this illicit trade that Ambassador Moctezuma mentioned, that has to do with weapons, no, issues about human trafficking as well, and certainly be able to stop in a much more efficient way the drugs that pass throughout our border without having illicit trade and all the value chains that we have in the region being interrupted because of this. No, I'm convinced that this balance is possible, and I think that certainly the piece that the Atlantic Council put together gives a great framework to start working together in this issue.
Thank you, Bosco. Adriana.
Well, I think it's a very difficult balance, Fer, because of course you want our borders to be secure, but we also need them to be agile. No, this study by the Atlantic Council has already provided like evidence, no, of how what's the impact of a 10-minute reduction in customs clearance processes. I think the key is technology. We need to develop together the use of technology to speed up customs clearance. I help on a daily basis many clients to tackle or to face issues with temporary seizures of products, lack of transparency sometimes in the processes that take place, and delays in customs clearance. And I think that this has been reduced gradually by the use of technology. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a major key. And I think that we have opportunities for the three governments to work together, not only using technology, but also harmonizing customs clearance processes and implementation of non-tariff regulations. Because if the three governments had the same non-tariff regulations, import permits to the same type of products, etc., that would speed up the process also.
Thank you. Thank you to the three of you for joining me for this conversation. I would have loved to kept on going for another half an hour. Unfortunately, we are short on time. Thank you so much. And this is not the end of this conversation. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Mafe. Thank you, Omar. Thank you, Adriana.
Bye-bye.
Bye.